The rain had been falling since 7, and by midnight it had turned mean. It came sideways now, driven by a wind that cut through canvas jackets and thin gloves, and the kind of pride that keeps a man from admitting he's cold. The streets outside the Aldrich Grand Hotel in Pittsburgh were slick and black, the kind of wet that made every headlight bloom into a halo. A few people still out moved quickly, heads down, wanting nothing more than to be somewhere else. Marcus Dean was not one of those people. He came through the revolving door at 12:14 in the morning, with rain dripping from the brim of his cap and a black leather wallet held carefully in both hands the way a man carries something that doesn't belong to him. His work boots left wet prints on the marble floor. His canvas jacket, the one with the frayed left cuff he kept meaning to fix, was soaked through at the shoulders. He was 38 years old and looked 45, not because life had been cruel exactly, but because it had been heavy. Heavy years leave marks that rest never fully erases. Before we begin, drop your city or state in the comments. Where are you watching this story from tonight? I'd love to know. He walked to the front desk. The lobby of the Aldrich Grand was the kind of place designed to remind you of your place in the world. 40-foot ceilings with coffered plaster, chandeliers that probably cost more than Marcus's apartment building. A fireplace on the east wall surrounded by guests in wool coats and leather, shoes holding glasses of something amber, laughing at something soft. The carpet under his boots was deep burgundy, and he was aware, acutely, physically aware, that his footprints were visible in it, dark with rainwater, tracking the path of someone who didn't belong. The desk clerk, a young man with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, looked up. "Can I help you?" Marcus set the wallet on the counter. Found this in the parking garage. Level 4, near the east stairwell. It was on the ground beside a black Cadillac Escalade. Tried the security booth, but nobody was in it. The clerk looked at the wallet, then at Marcus, then at the wallet again. "One moment, sir." He picked up the phone. He spoke quietly. Marcus stood and waited, hands at his sides, rain still dripping from his jacket onto the marble. He didn't fidget. He didn't look around at the other guests the way a nervous man might. He only looked tired. There's a difference. Tired is honest. Nervous is something else. 2 security guards appeared within 90 seconds. Then a third. Then a man in a gray suit who introduced himself as the overnight manager and asked Marcus to step to the side, which Marcus did without complaint. "Did you open it?" the manager asked. Yes, the manager's eyes sharpened. Why? To find out who it belonged to. "Did you remove anything from it?" "No." "The cash? Still there." The manager opened the wallet slowly, the way people open things when they expect to find less than what they were told. He counted. Then he counted again. He looked up at Marcus with an expression that had trouble choosing between gratitude and suspicion, and landed, as it often does with men in expensive suits, looking at men in wet canvas jackets, somewhere closer to suspicion. "It's $40,000 in here," he said. "I know, and you just brought it back. It's not mine." The words were simple. They landed in the lobby and stayed there. A couple near the fireplace had turned to look. A bellhop pretended to be busy with a luggage cart but wasn't moving. The desk clerk had stopped typing. That was when the elevator opened and Serena Voss walked in. She was the kind of woman who entered rooms rather than arrived in them. There was a difference, and it was entirely in the way she carried herself, which was the way of someone who had learned very young that the world would make room if you moved through it like you expected it to. She was 41, CEO of Voss Aldrich Holdings, whose real estate and development portfolio stretched across 6 states, and whose name was on the building they were standing in because the Aldrich Grand was her family's flagship property, and she had gutted and rebuilt it from the bones up 7 years ago, when she inherited a debt-soaked legacy and turned it into something worth inheriting. She wore a navy coat over a black dress. She had been at a dinner on the 42nd floor and had come down because her CFO, Roland Hale, had texted her. Security situation at the front desk. "You should see this." She crossed the lobby and looked at the wallet on the counter. Then she looked at Marcus. "Is this yours?" she asked, meaning the wallet. "No, ma'am, it's yours. Or it was in your garage." She looked at him for a moment with the kind of directness that made people feel assessed. "You found it, yes. And brought it here." "Yes. Midnight. I was already here. I do maintenance work on the third shift, parking structure primarily. I was finishing up a job on the ventilation system." Roland Hale appeared at Serena's elbow. He was 53, silver-haired, wore the particular expression of a man who had spent decades turning other people's doubts into useful currency. He looked at Marcus the way you might look at a math problem you're fairly sure you've already solved. 40,000 in cash, executive cards, company-eyed, Roland said, his voice low enough to feel private but loud enough for the security guards to hear. "He just happened to bring it back, Serena." He let the pause do its work. "What are the odds?" "What are you suggesting?" Serena asked. "I'm suggesting that men who work night shifts in parking garages don't walk into five-star hotel lobbies at midnight to return wallets full of cash. Unless they want something." A couple of people nearby heard that. One of them, a man in a blazer waiting for the elevator, gave a small nod, the kind of agreement that costs nothing. Marcus heard all of it. He didn't respond to Roland. He looked only at Serena. "Ma'am, I have a daughter waiting for me. If you need me to give a statement or talk to police, I'll do that. But if everything checks out, I'd like to head home." It was the word daughter that did it. Not as a bid for sympathy. There was nothing in his voice that asked for anything. As a fact. Plain and unadorned, the way a man states the things that hold his world together. Serena looked at the wallet, then at Marcus, then at the pharmacy bag tucked under his left arm, which she hadn't noticed before. A white paper bag, folded at the top, held close to his body with the particular care of someone protecting something that had cost them more than it should have. "You may go," she said. Roland's head turned. "Serena." The wallet was returned intact. "He's free to go." She paused, then looked at Marcus directly. "Thank you." Marcus gave a single nod. He pulled his cap back on, turned, and walked toward the revolving door. The wet prints of his boots tracked back across the burgundy carpet, smaller now, already beginning to dry at the edges. Serena watched him go. Roland watched her watching. "We should find out who he is," Roland said. Serena picked up the wallet. "I know who he is. His name was in the maintenance log when I hired the overnight crew 6 months ago." She ran her thumb along the wallet's edge. "Marcus Dean. Then we should run a background check." "Why?" Roland gestured toward the revolving door, through which Marcus had now disappeared. "Because nobody returns $40,000 for nothing." Serena looked at the door for another moment. "You might be right," she said quietly. The fact that she said it, that she didn't immediately push back, would bother her more than she expected. Later, in the hours before dawn when the city went quiet enough to hear yourself think. Outside, Marcus crossed the valet lane with his head down against the rain. His truck was parked on the street 2 blocks over, a 2009 Ford F-150, gray where it wasn't rust, with a driver's side mirror held on by a strip of electrical tape and a heater that worked on its left side only. He got in, sat for a moment with both hands on the wheel, and breathed. The pharmacy bag was on the passenger seat. He'd picked up Zoe's rescue inhaler at the 24-hour pharmacy on 5th Avenue at 11 before his shift ended. New prescription, the one Dr. Peterson had called urgent, was still pending insurance approval, which meant it was still out of reach, which meant the inhaler in that bag was the same one they'd been relying on for 3 months. The one that helped but wasn't enough. The one that made him lie awake some nights listening to her breathe through the wall between their rooms. He pulled his phone from his jacket pocket. One text from his neighbor, Mrs. Caldwell, who watched Zoe on nights he worked late. "She's asleep. Breathing okay. Don't rush." He stared at that text for a long moment. "Don't rush." He put the truck in drive and pulled into the rain. He didn't know he was being followed. Serena Voss's car, a black Lincoln Town car driven by her driver, a quiet man named Victor who had worked for her family for 11 years, pulled out of the hotel's private exit 30 seconds after Marcus's truck turned onto Liberty Avenue. Victor kept 2 car lengths back and said nothing, because Serena hadn't asked for his opinion, and in 11 years he had learned the difference between the moments she wanted conversation and the moments she wanted silence. This was silence. Serena sat in the back with the wallet in her lap open. The cash was still there, banded in hundreds. The credit cards, the company ID, the executive health card, and in the slim interior pocket, the one she'd almost forgotten about, the silver flash drive. Roland had handed her at dinner that evening, telling her it contained the quarterly projections for tomorrow's board meeting, asking her to keep it on her person. She'd thought nothing of it at the time. She thought about it now. What are the odds? She watched Marcus's truck move through the wet streets of Pittsburgh, stopping fully at every red light, signaling every turn, slowing for a stray cat that crossed on Friendship Avenue near the shuttered florist. There was nothing guilty in how he drove, nothing rushed or erratic. He moved through the city like a man who had learned a long time ago to do things correctly, even when no one was watching, because that was the only version of correctness that meant anything. They left downtown. The streets changed character as they moved east, the glass towers and valet awnings giving way to brick apartments and corner stores with their lights half on to row houses with sagging porches and sidewalks buckled by old tree roots, to neighborhoods that the city's glossy promotional material never photographed. Victor slowed as Marcus's truck turned into the parking lot of St. Michael's Children's Clinic. "Emergency entrance," Victor said quietly. Serena sat up. The clinic was a squat brick building on a corner, fluorescent lit, with a wheelchair ramp out front and a hand-painted mural along the east wall. Children of a dozen shades, rendered in cheerful colors that had faded to something more honest over the years. 2 cars in the lot. 1 ambulance, parked and quiet. Marcus got out with the pharmacy bag, but before he went inside, he stopped beside his truck and pressed both palms flat on the roof. He stood that way for a moment, head bowed, not in prayer exactly, or maybe in the kind of prayer that doesn't use words, the kind that is really just a man gathering himself before he has to be strong in front of someone small. Then he went in. Serena told herself to stay in the car. She lasted approximately 45 seconds. The clinic's waiting room smelled of antiseptic and burnt coffee, and the particular stale warmth of a room that never fully empties. Television mounted in the corner played a nature documentary with the sound off. A young mother slept in a plastic chair with a toddler pressed against her shoulder. A teenage boy sat alone near the window, headphones on, staring at nothing. Serena pulled her baseball cap lower and found a seat near the hallway where she could see the admissions desk. Marcus was already there. "The inhaler, I picked it up," she heard him say. His voice was low and even, the voice of a man practiced at not letting worry bleed into his words. "But they told me the new prescription still needs the insurance override, Doctor." Peterson marked it urgent. The woman behind the desk, heavyset, kind-faced, the particular exhaustion of someone who delivered bad news on behalf of systems she didn't design, looked at her screen and then back at Marcus with an expression that contained both apology and helplessness in equal measure. "Mr. Dean, I'm so sorry. The insurer rejected the appeal again this morning. The specialist medication, without the override, the out-of-pocket is $2,800. Marcus went still. Not visibly. If you weren't paying attention, you might have missed it. But there was a fraction of a second where everything in him stopped, the way a clock stops, cleanly, all at once. Then he reached into his jacket and came out with an envelope. The paper was soft and creased, the kind of envelope that had been opened and refolded many times. "I have $640, he said. "I get paid Friday. Can I? The pharmacy can't release it on partial payment, Mr. Dean? I've asked before." The woman's voice was genuinely sorry. "It's the policy." Marcus looked at the envelope in his hands. Then he nodded. slowly, with the particular dignity of a man who has learned to absorb blows without showing the impact to anyone who might worry about him. "Okay," he said. "Thank you. We'll try the appeal again in the morning, Doctor." Peterson said she'd call them directly. "I appreciate it." And then, from down the hall, past the curtained bays, a small voice. "Daddy?" Marcus turned fast. Not panicked, but with the speed of a man whose entire nervous system is calibrated to that one word, spoken in that one particular voice. Zoe was 7 years old. She stood at the edge of the hallway in purple pajamas with a pattern of small white stars holding a stuffed rabbit by one ear. A nurse stood behind her, clipboard in hand, with the expression of someone who had seen enough of this kind of thing to stop pretending it was fine. Zoe was pale in the way kids get when they've been breathing too hard for too long. But she was upright and she was smiling. The smile was aimed entirely at her father. Marcus crossed the floor in 4 steps and crouched down in front of her. "Hey, Lily Bug." The nickname came out soft, automatic, like a thing worn smooth from years of use. He touched her face, her hair. "You scared me. I wasn't scared." Zoe said, "No, only a little." That's brave. He was checking her the way parents do. Eyes, color, the small rise and fall of her chest, while pretending he was just holding her. "How are you breathing?" "Better. The nurse gave me a treatment." Marcus looked up at the nurse, who gave him a measured nod. She responded well. "Keep the rescue inhaler close and don't let her run in the cold. Call us if anything changes tonight." "Yes, ma'am." The nurse handed him the discharge paperwork. He signed it with the pen she offered, standing up, still keeping one hand on Zoe's shoulder. Serena watched him fold the paper and tuck it into his jacket pocket alongside the envelope. The pharmacy bag went under his arm. Then Zoe looked up at him with the kind of directness only children manage, the kind that comes from not yet knowing how to soften a hard question. "Daddy, are we getting the new medicine?" Marcus crouched again, eye level with her. "We're working on it," he said. "Dr. Peterson's going to make some calls." "Will it work?" He looked at her for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "It's gonna work." He believed it, or he chose to, which might be the same thing when the alternative is letting a 7-year-old see thee. Serena looked away. She stared at the silent television, at the nature documentary playing without sound, an aerial shot of some vast ocean. She sat with the strange, specific shame of a woman who had $40,000 in her coat pocket, which was, now that she thought about it, a wallet she'd been carrying for a week without opening, because $40,000 in petty cash was the kind of thing she signed off on without registering, while a man 30 feet away was trying to figure out how to get his daughter's medicine on a partial payment. She sat with that for a while. It didn't feel good, and it wasn't supposed to. When she looked back toward the admissions desk, Marcus was lifting Zoe into his arms. He adjusted her weight against his hip. She settled against his shoulder with the ease of long habit, the rabbit dangling from her hand. He thanked the nurse again. He thanked the desk clerk. He said good night to the tired young mother in the waiting room as he passed, quietly. Just a word, the kind of thing you say when you notice people, without needing anything from them. Then he walked out into the rain. Serena sat alone in the waiting room for a long minute before she followed. They drove for 20 minutes. Marcus's truck moved through neighborhoods that got quieter and smaller as they went, past a 24-hour laundromat with a pink neon sign that buzzed in the rain, past a dollar store with hand-lettered sale signs in the window, past a church whose marquee read, "You Are Not Forgotten," in block letters that had been up long enough to bleach at the edges. Victor followed at a respectful distance, 2 red lights back, saying nothing. Serena sat and watched the city she technically owned pieces of look entirely different from the back of a car she'd never had to pay for. Marcus's truck turned into the lot of a 4-story brick apartment complex on Haverford Street, between a closed auto parts store and a chain-link fence, surrounding what had once been a playground and was now mostly mud and a rusted swing set, with 1 swing remaining. The building was solid, old, the kind of construction that would outlast the people who couldn't afford to maintain it. Dark brick, wide stairs, a row of metal mailboxes bolted near the entrance, most of them dented. Marcus parked. He got out with Zoe still in his arms. She had fallen mostly asleep against his shoulder, the rabbit dragging along his back. He carried her up the exterior stairs to the second floor, shifting her weight to one hip to free his right hand for the door keys, unlocking it with the practiced ease of a man who had done this many times, many weather conditions, in varying states of exhaustion. The door opened. Warm light spilled out. Not much. A single lamp somewhere inside, but enough. Victor pulled the Lincoln to the curb across the street and cut the headlights. Serena leaned forward slightly in her seat. She could see the apartment through the window, because the curtains hadn't been drawn. Not from carelessness, she thought, but because there was no one to draw them for, no reason to keep the inside private from a street that wasn't watching. A narrow kitchen with a pale yellow light over the stove. A small table with 2 chairs. Against the wall near the window, Christmas tree no taller than 3 feet, set in a coffee can weighted with gravel, decorated with paper stars and a single strand of silver tinsel. The stars were handmade, she could tell from the shapes, not perfect, cut with children's scissors. Marcus came back into view after a few minutes. Zoe must have been put to bed. He moved through the kitchen, with the quiet efficiency of someone accustomed to silence, putting a kettle on, laying his jacket over a chair, unlacing his boots and setting them neatly by the door. He filled a pot and set it on the stove. He placed a folded towel along the bottom of the window nearest the table. The window leaked, she realized, watching the careful placement. He went to the kitchen drawer and came out with 4 envelopes bound together with a rubber band. He set them on the table, one by one. Even from across the street, Serena could see they were labeled. She couldn't read the words, but she could see the thick black marker, the deliberate writing, the way he handled them. He opened the first one and counted what was inside, then the second, the third. With each one, something in his posture shifted, not dramatically, not the collapse of a man breaking down, just the slow, quiet process of a man doing math and not liking the answers. He sat down at the table, pressed the heels of both hands against his forehead, and stayed that way. For a moment, elbows on the table, very still. Then Zoe's voice came from the bedroom. Serena couldn't hear the words, but she could see Marcus's response. He straightened immediately, the weariness rearranging itself into something that functioned like calm, and he called back something that made whatever came next manageable. He got up, carried a bowl from the stove to the table, and disappeared briefly down the hall. When he came back, Zoe was with him, wrapped in a blanket, the rabbit under her arm, climbing into a chair at the kitchen table. With the slow determination of a sick child who wants to be near her parent, Marcus sat across from her and said something that made her laugh. Not a big laugh, a small one, the kind that costs nothing and is worth everything. He was pretending something, that the spoon was too heavy, maybe, or doing a voice, something small and silly, and Zoe laughed, and the sound of it, even muffled behind glass and rain and a car window, was the kind of sound that answered a question Serena hadn't known she was asking. She sat back. "Take me home, Victor," she said. Victor looked at her in the rearview mirror for just a moment before he started the car. He didn't say anything. In 11 years, he had learned that some silences were not invitations. Serena looked once more at the window as they pulled away. The lamp, the little tree with its paper stars, Marcus across from Zoe, the two of them in the small yellow light of a kitchen that held everything they needed. Not quite everything they needed. She looked at the wallet in her hands. Then she looked at the flash drive. Then she put it all back in her coat pocket and watched Pittsburgh move past the windows until there was nothing left to see but her own building, lit up against the low gray sky. She didn't sleep. By 4 in the morning, she was standing at the kitchen window of her penthouse on the 44th floor, barefoot on the heated tile, watching the city in the dark. Pittsburgh at 4 a.m. was a different city from the one people photographed. The rivers going black and quiet, The bridges hung with lights no one was driving across, hills rising in dark shapes on the far side of the Monongahela. It was, in its own way, beautiful. It had always been beautiful to her, the way cities are beautiful when you're high enough above them that the difficulty doesn't show. She had her laptop open on the counter. She'd searched Marcus Dean's name an hour ago. Not through the company's security team. She hadn't wanted that on record. Hadn't wanted Roland to know she was looking. Just a regular search, the kind anyone could do. The first results were ordinary. A contractor's license, registered in Allegheny County. A mention in a neighborhood association meeting minutes from 4 years ago, something about sidewalk repair. Then, an archived article from the Pittsburgh Tribune, dated 9 years back, with a photograph of a younger Marcus standing in front of a highway overpass in Harrisburg, wearing a hard hat and a grin, looking like a man who had just done something he was proud of. The headline: Young engineer among team credited with emergency bridge retrofit after flood damage. She read the article twice. Marcus Dean, 31 at the time, structural engineer, had been part of a state DOT team that redesigned load-bearing supports on 3 rural bridges after a significant flood event left them compromised. The project came in under budget and ahead of schedule. One of the senior engineers on the project was quoted calling him the kind of detail man you build a career around. She looked at the photograph for a long time. The grin, the hard hat, the man who was not yet acquainted with what was coming. She found it 3 articles later, in the Tribune's accident log section, the kind of coverage that ran 5 paragraphs on a bad day. A woman named Hannah Dean, 32, had been killed on I-376 outside of Pittsburgh when a semi drifted lanes in heavy rain. She'd been pregnant. Daughter Zoe, age 2, was in the back seat and survived without serious physical injury. After that, Marcus's name appeared only in the contractor's license, the association meeting, the night shift crew roster at Voss Aldrich Maintenance Services LLC. From structural engineer to overnight maintenance, 9 years. Not failure. Scandal. Not any single spectacular collapse. Just what happened when grief and medical debt and the architecture of a system that charges you for surviving arrived all at once, and a man had to choose between rebuilding his career and keeping his daughter alive and warm, and in one place. He chose his daughter, and the career was the thing that quietly, slowly went away. Serena closed the laptop. She stood in the dark kitchen with the city below her and thought about a very specific thing, that she had almost said it. In the lobby, when Roland said nobody returns $40,000 for nothing, she had almost agreed. Out loud. She had almost said, "You might be right," meant it as a conclusion, rather than a question. And the only thing that had stopped her was something she couldn't fully name. Something in the way Marcus had held that pharmacy bag, some quality of tiredness that didn't look like guilt. She thought about the flash drive. She thought about Roland's message. Handled the Callaway situation. "You are protected. Wait." That had been the original story. Roland's name was Hale and the man was Dean. She went back to her phone. Roland's message. Handled the Dean situation. "You are protected." She hadn't responded yet. She set her phone face down on the counter and watched the sky over the river begin to go from black to deep blue, the first suggestion of a morning that didn't know yet what it was going to mean. At 7:15, 3 things happened in quick succession. Roland texted again. "Board call at 9. Need the flash drive. Also, I took the liberty of flagging Dean to our security team. Standard protocol." Serena put her phone in her bag and didn't respond. At 7:40, Victor texted, "Mr. Dean just left his apartment, heading toward a diner on Haverford." Serena looked at that text for a long moment, then, "Victor, pick me up in 20 minutes. No, 15. Miller and Rosa's diner had been on the corner of Haverford and Clement for 31 years, which was longer than some of the surrounding buildings been standing and longer than the street's current residents had been alive. It was the kind of place that knew its regulars by their orders and their moods, and the particular shade of silence they wanted on a given morning. The counter ran the full length of the left wall. 8 booths on the right. Chalkboard above the pass-through listed the day's specials in Rosa Milanes's handwriting, which leaned severely to the right as if in a permanent hurry. Rosa was 63, silver-haired, had the no-nonsense warmth of a woman who had fed people through enough hard seasons to have stopped distinguishing between charity and hospitality. The place smelled of coffee and bacon and maple syrup, and the kind of honest grease that came from cooking the same things the same, right way for 3 decades. Serena came in at 8:15 wearing jeans, a gray wool sweater, a cap she'd bought at a Pirates game 4 years ago, and never worn since. She took the back booth with a sight line to the door and ordered coffee and eggs she had no intention of eating. At 8:40, Marcus came in. Rosa looked up from behind the counter. "Morning, Marcus." "Morning, Rosa. Zoo okay?" "She's home resting. Mrs. Caldwell's with her." Rosa's face shifted into something between relief and concern. "You eat anything today?" "Coffee's fine." "Coffee is not fine. It's a beverage." "Booth's full. Grab the corner stool." She paused. "There's a leak in the prep sink. Been doing it all week." Marcus set his toolbox on the floor near the counter. "I'll look at it. Eat first. Sink first. I'll put an order in. Rosa, consider it the diagnostic fee." She pointed at the back. "Go." He went. Serena watched him disappear through the door to the kitchen and heard, faintly, the sound of tools being set down, water running, a wrench turning. Normal sounds. The sounds of a man who knew what he was doing and did it without ceremony. 10 minutes later, the bell above the front door rang, and a man in a business suit walked in with a phone in his hand. And the expression of someone who had not yet fully arrived in the room his body was occupying. He sat at the counter, ignored the menu, and held his empty coffee cup up without looking at Rosa. Rosa was carrying 3 plates to a booth. She didn't look at him. "I'll be right with you," she said. "I've been waiting 10 minutes, the man said. This was a lie. He'd been there less than 2. He said it in the voice of a man who lies about small things by reflex, because the truth serves him less often than the adjusted version. Rosa set the plates down and came back behind the counter. "I apologize," she said, the tone of someone who is not apologizing. She reached for the coffee pot. "The service here is always like this?" The man said to no one in particular. A few people heard him. No one answered him. Marcus came out from the back, wiping his hands on a shop rag. He saw the situation at a glance, the way people who've worked service jobs see things, and without pausing crossed to the counter, picked up the coffee pot from the warmer and refilled the man's cup. "Here you go," he said, simply. "No theater." The man looked at him with the expression people use when they're not sure if they're being helped or mocked. "You work here?" "Today, apparently." He topped off the cups of the 3 people nearest the man, a nurse in scrubs, an older man reading a newspaper, construction worker with plaster on his jacket, without them asking, then set the pot back and returned to his stool. Rosa watched him from the pass-through. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Serena watched from the back booth. She had her hands around her coffee cup, and she was thinking about what it meant that a man who had just spent the night at a children's clinic and returned to an eviction notice and opened a set of Christmas envelopes that didn't add up still moved through the world like this, quietly, practically, filling other people's cups without needing to be noticed for it. She was also thinking about the flash drive. She'd read it that morning, all of it. She needed to back up. 4 nights ago, Roland had handed her the flash drive over dinner at the Aldrich Grand's 42nd floor restaurant, where they'd been reviewing the upcoming board presentation. He'd handed it to her across the table, said the projections were on it, asked her to keep it secure overnight. She'd slipped it into her wallet without looking at it, because Roland had been her CFO for 6 years and she trusted his logistics the way you trust a function you've been using long enough to stop examining. She'd opened the drive at 6 this morning on her personal laptop, expecting financial projections. What she found instead, tucked in a folder marked Q4 Prelum, but containing nothing that looked like preliminary anything, were files she hadn't seen before, transfer documents, Shell vendor accounts, a series of payments routed from the Voss Aldrich Children's Health Initiative over the past 4 years, disappearing into LLCs with addresses that didn't correspond to any real office and websites that had been live for less time than the payments had. Flowing. The Children's Health Initiative was Serena's. She'd funded it out of her own holdings after Hannah Dean, though she hadn't known hadn't made that connection yet. After the kind of story that had moved her enough to act, was supposed to fund grants for uninsured and underinsured pediatric patients in Allegheny County. 42 families on the current roster, 68 applications in review. Or that was what she'd been told. The files on the drive told a different story. The story they told was of money moving out of the fund in routed tranches, not to families, not to clinics, but to Roland Hale's shell accounts, beginning approximately 6 months after the initiative launched and continuing, apparently, to the present. Not all of it. Enough of it. Enough that a 7-year-old girl's insurance appeal had sat in a pending queue for 8 months, while a man Serena paid $400,000 a year to help her run her company had been redirecting the money meant to pay for her medication. Serena had sat with her coffee and that information for a long time before she was able to move. Then she'd thought about Roland's text, handled the Dean situation, and she'd understood what the wallet had really been. Not a test of Marcus's honesty, a setup to remove him from circulation before he could inadvertently bring the drive to anyone who might look at it. Marcus hadn't even known the drive was there. When Marcus came out from the kitchen and settled onto his corner stool with a plate Rosa had put in front of him, eggs, toast, a side of fruit he'd probably argue about, Serena got up from her booth. She walked to the register, paid for her untouched breakfast, and left $100 bills under the edge of the plate. Rosa came over to clear, looked at the money, looked at Serena with wide eyes. "Honey, that is way too much," Serena said quietly. "It's for him for whatever he needs." She turned toward the door. "Ma'am." She stopped. She didn't turn immediately, just stopped, with her hand not quite on the door. Marcus had seen it. Of course he had. He'd been watching the room the way people who've worked in rooms do, not suspiciously, just aware. She turned. He was on his feet, holding the folded bills. His expression wasn't angry. It was something more careful than that, measured, like a man choosing his words before he had all of them. "You forgot this," he said. "I didn't forget it. Then I can't take it. You don't know why I left it." He looked at her for a moment. She had kept the cap on, kept her head slightly down, but they were close now. She saw the recognition pass across his face, not of her specifically, but of the situation. He'd seen the Lincoln last night. He'd seen it again this morning. Some part of him had been adding things up. "I know how it feels," he said. "Receiving money like that. How does it feel? Like someone's decided something about you." He set the bills on the counter, not toward her, just setting them down. Like whatever they think they're fixing, they've already made up their mind about what broke. Rosa had moved to the far end of the counter and was very deliberately not listening. Serena looked at the money. Then at Marcus. "It wasn't pity," she said. "Maybe it wasn't meant as pity, but it felt like it, wouldn't it?" He said it gently, not as an attack, as a question. "Ma'am, someone wanted to help. If they genuinely wanted to help, they could help in a way that didn't require me to stand in a room while people watched." The diner was quiet in the particular way of a room full of people pretending not to listen. Serena said, "You knew I followed you. I knew someone did. Why didn't you say anything?" He picked up his coffee cup, looked at it, set it down. "People who need proof usually aren't ready for the truth." She let that sit. "I owe you an explanation. You don't owe me anything. I know it's on the flash drive," she said. And those 6 words, changed the temperature of the room. Marcus looked at her. The measured calm was still there, but something behind it had shifted. "What flash drive?" "The one in my wallet. The one that was in your wallet. The one that was planted in my wallet by the man who sent police to your workplace this morning." The silence that followed was not comfortable. Marcus set his coffee cup down slowly. "My workplace," he said. "Your daughter's emergency last night, your apartment. The eviction notice on your door this morning, the unpaid prescription. Roland Hale knows all of it. He knows because he has someone watching. He flagged you to company security at 7 this morning and filed a report claiming you may have accessed confidential materials and tampered with company property." Marcus's jaw tightened. "My daughter," he said, "not a question, just the weight of it. He's trying to discredit you before the drive's contents come to anyone's attention. He doesn't know you never looked at it. He only knows you handled the wallet." Marcus stood very still for a long moment. Then he put $2 on the counter. For the coffee, for anything else, the gesture was precise, and picked up his toolbox. "My daughter is with my neighbor," he said. "I know. I need to go. I know." Serena took a step closer, lowering her voice. "Mr. Dean, Marcus, I need you to understand that I'm not asking for your help with this. Have what I need. But there are police going to that diner. This diner, your workplace, wherever they were told to find you. And when they do, how you respond in the first 5 minutes is going to matter." He looked at her. "Tell the truth," she said. "All of it. Don't minimize. Don't embellish. Don't assume they're on your side or against it. Just the exact truth." "That's what I do," he said. The way he said it, not as a boast, not defensively, just as a statement of fact, as basic and unadorned as I breathe, was the thing that finally fully cracked through the last layer of Serena Voss's careful, professional distance. "I know," she said. "That's why we have a problem." The officers arrived 12 minutes later. There were 2 of them, Callahan and Park, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, both with the measured neutrality of people who had learned to not bring their expressions into rooms before they knew what they were walking into. Behind them from the door came a man Serena didn't recognize, mid-40s, company badge, the clipped walk of someone from Voss Aldrich's private security division. Rosa stood at the counter with her arms crossed in the way of a woman who had seen things in this diner that deserved actual concern and recognized, "This is something different." "Marcus Dean?" Officer Callahan said. "That's me." Marcus had stood when they came in. He didn't put his hands up, didn't back away. He just stood there the way he stood everywhere, which was steady. "We'd like you to come with us to answer a few questions. There's a complaint filed by Voss Aldrich Holdings regarding possible tampering with executive property and unauthorized access to confidential materials." Rosa said. "That man returned a wallet. I watched the news last night." "Ma'am, we're just here to take a statement. He fixed my sink this morning. He fixes everything in this neighborhood when it breaks. He's been coming here for 4 years and I have never once." "Rosa." Marcus's voice was quiet. She stopped. He looked at her with something that might have been gratitude and might have been something more complicated. "It's okay. It is not okay. It's okay." He turned to the officers. "I'll come. I'd like to call my neighbor first so someone can pick up my daughter from my apartment when she wakes up." Officer Park nodded. "That's fine." He pulled out his phone and made the call, brief, practical, the words of a man who had learned to arrange contingencies without catastrophizing. Then he turned to Serena, who had not moved from her place near the counter, and looked at her in a way that contained exactly one question. She answered it. "I'll be at the Aldrich. When they're done with you, come there." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he picked up his toolbox and handed it to Rosa. "Can you hold this?" "Until you're back," she said. Her voice had gone rough at the edges. He nodded. He walked out with the officers. The security man followed. Through the window, Serena watched Marcus get into the back of the police sedan with the unhurried calm of a man who had decided the only thing he could control was his own conduct and had made his peace with that. No performance of innocence, no righteous anger. Just a man getting into a car because the truth, eventually, was going to need to be told somewhere, and he was prepared to tell it. Rosa turned from the window. She looked at Serena with the kind of steady evaluation that came from 30 years of reading people across a diner. "You're Serena Voss," she said, not a question. Serena didn't bother denying it. Yes, the woman whose wallet he returned. Yes. Rosa picked up Marcus's plate, the eggs he hadn't finished, the toast, the fruit, and carried it to the pass-through window. Then she turned back. "What are you going to do?" she asked. Serena picked up the bills from the counter and folded them back into her pocket. "Something I should have done 3 hours ago." The security office on the 4th floor of Aldrich Tower smelled of recycled air and the faint anxiety of surveillance. 4 monitors, a long desk, 2 technicians who stood up too fast when Serena walked in. "Voss, we weren't expecting." "I know." She set her bag down on the desk. "I need footage from the parking structure on level 4. Last night, between 11 p.m. and 12:15 a.m. East stairwell approach and elevator bank." The technician hesitated. "Mr. Hale mentioned that footage was under internal review. Mr. Hale doesn't own the building. Pull it up." He pulled it up. The first camera showed the east stairwell at 11:31 p.m. The level was nearly empty. 3 cars, low orange light, rainwater dripping from the ceiling seams. At 11:34, the door from the stairwell opened and Roland Hale came through. Serena had expected it. She had known it since the flash drive, since reading his files, since 4 in the morning, when she'd been standing in her kitchen adding things up. She had expected it, and still, watching him on the monitor, the careful look over both shoulders, the deliberate placement of the wallet beside the rear tire of the black Escalade, the crouch as he checked the contents, the unhurried return to the stairwell. Still, it landed differently than expectation, because she had trusted him, not blindly. She wasn't a woman who trusted blindly. But she had trusted him the way you trust the scaffolding on a building you're standing on, not by examining every morning, but by assuming that something which has held this long will probably keep holding. There was something specific and distinct about finding out that the scaffolding had not been holding you up, but slowly, quietly, taking things from you while you weren't watching. "Keep playing," she said. 3 minutes after Roland left, Marcus's truck came into frame. He parked. He got out. He walked to the Escalade, noticed the wallet, picked it up. He opened it. Briefly, one look at the ID card, the kind of look you gave something to read the name, and then looked toward the empty security booth. He waited. Nobody came. He walked to the elevator with the wallet open in his hand. The elevator camera showed him alone in the mirrored box, ascending. He held the wallet the way you held something that didn't belong to you, carefully, at a slight distance, as if proximity implied possession. He never touched the cash. He didn't take out the flash drive. He looked at the ID card once more, mouthed the name. She could read it on his lips. Serena Voss, and then stood quietly the rest of the way up. "He told the truth," one of the technicians said. "Yes," Serena said, "he did." She straightened and picked up her bag. "I need you to forward this footage to legal, to the police liaison contact on file, to my personal email, all of it unedited, with timestamps." She paused at the door. "And when Roland Hale comes in this morning, call me before you let him up." The technician was already reaching for his phone. Roland arrived at 8:55. Serena met him in the executive elevator lobby on the 41st floor, which was either coincidence or not. She'd been watching the building's arrival notifications. He was in his good Navy suit, the one he wore on board days, and he had the expression of a man who had spent the drive over rehearsing for a version of this conversation in which he had the advantage. "Serena, I've been trying to reach you since last night. I know. Walk with me." She turned and walked toward her office. He followed, which meant he was slightly behind her and couldn't read her face. "The board presentation. We're pushing the board meeting." "We can't push the board meeting. There are 6 directors flying in. We're pushing it." She opened her office door and held it. He came in. She let it close behind them. The city was lit and indifferent beyond the windows. She stood in front of it and looked at Roland. "Tell me about Marcus Dean," she said. Roland opened his hands in a gesture of reasonable concern. "That's what I've been trying to reach you about. I was worried he'd gotten to you. He seemed like the kind of person who, Look, I'm sure he's not a bad man, but a man in that situation, with a sick kid and a landlord threatening eviction, a wallet full of cash appears in his hands. He returned it. He returned most of it. We can't know, he returned all of it. I have the footage. Roland paused. Just a beat, but a beat was enough. The footage doesn't account for the flash drive, he said. He could have copied it before. He didn't touch the flash drive. Serena, with respect, you can't know that from camera footage. No, I can know it from reading the flash drive. She held his gaze. Which I did this morning, all of it. The rehearsed version of this conversation had not included this. She could see him rerouting in real time. The practiced fluency of a man who was very good at managing narratives beginning to work the problem. But he was working it slightly too fast. The effort was visible now in a way it never had been before. Those files are. What are they, Roland? They're preliminary projections. Context that. The Children's Health Initiative, she said. Tell me about the Children's Health Initiative. The pause this time was longer. There have been some allocation irregularities, he said carefully. I was actually planning to brief you on that today. Part of what I wanted to address before the board meeting. Irregularities, she repeated. Administrative. $4.7 million. Serena said. Over 4 years, routed through 6 LLCs that didn't exist 12 months ago and won't exist 6 months from now. Roland's expression, which had been working very hard to remain reasonable, began to change. Something underneath it stopped pretending. You don't understand the full picture. I understand enough of it. She moved away from the window, toward the desk. Marcus Dean's daughter has a documented urgent need for specialist medication. She's been on the fund's pending roster for 8 months. Her doctor has filed 3 appeals. All 3 were flagged for review and never moved. She picked up a folder from the desk. She'd printed the files before coming in. 41 other families with children in similar or worse situations. 8 months of pending reviews. No approvals. Roland's voice had gone flat. That is not. I know what it is. She set the folder down. I know what the flash drive is, too. You handed it to me to keep because your office was being audited that night. I remember now. You mentioned the compliance team was doing their quarterly pass, and you needed it off-site, and I was the most convenient vault. She paused. What I don't know is whether you intended to frame Marcus, or whether that was an improvisation when he found the wallet. Roland said nothing. Because the setup in the garage, that was improvised, wasn't it? You saw the opportunity. An overnight maintenance worker, a lost wallet, pretext for discrediting anyone who might carry evidence they don't know they have. She looked at him steadily. Did you drop the wallet yourself, or did you have someone do it? The question was precise, and the precision was deliberate, and she watched Roland understand that she already knew the answer, and was asking him to hear himself confirm it. He said, I'm going to need to speak to legal before we continue this conversation. That's your right. Serena walked to the door and opened it. Victor was in the hallway. He had been in the hallway since she'd texted him from the elevator because 11 years was enough time to learn that sometimes be available meant be in the hallway. Mr. Hale is leaving, Serena said. Please make sure he's accompanied to the lobby. Serena, you're terminated, Roland. Effective now, for cause. My legal team will be in contact with yours before noon. She held the door. In case you're considering the alternative on the drive, the backup files at whatever address that was in Delaware. I'd want you to know that I've already flagged that location to the Federal Financial Crimes Division. As of about 40 minutes ago. Roland looked at her for a long moment. He looked, for the first time in 6 years, like a man without a plan. He walked out. Victor closed the door behind him. Serena stood in her office for a moment. The city went on outside the window. Indifferent, going about its morning, she breathed. She let the adrenaline move through her and settle. Then she called the police liaison contact and told them to release Marcus Dean. He came in through the ground floor entrance at 11:20, still in his work jacket, still with the particular quality of tiredness he'd had since the night before. Not worse now, but different. The kind of tired that came from being put through something and coming out the other side still upright. Serena met him in the lobby. She had considered the boardroom. She had considered her office, the formal space, the symbolic authority of the desk, and the chair, and the height. She had rejected all of it because what she needed to say to this man did not belong in a boardroom. She said, "Thank you for coming," he said. "Didn't have many other places to be. Your daughter." "Mrs. Caldwell has her. She's okay," he paused. The officers were professional. They were fine. "I know. I'm sorry it happened." He looked at her. "Are you sorry it happened, or sorry it happened to me specifically?" "Both," she said, "for different reasons." He nodded slowly. He was watching her the way people who had been fooled before, not often, significantly, watched people who seemed to be offering something. Not with hostility, with a kind of careful attention. She said, "We sit down." They found 2 chairs near the lobby fireplace, which was lit on this gray morning. The space around them was quiet. It was a weekday, mid-morning, the breakfast rush long gone and lunch not yet started. Serena told him about the flash drive. Not all of it, not the technical details of the shell accounts or the transfer structure, not the numbers she'd now committed to legal. But the part that mattered to him, she told him directly and completely. She watched his face as she told him about the Children's Health Initiative. She watched him understand, step by step, that the 8 months of pending appeals, the 3 insurance rejections, the desk clerk's apologetic tiredness, that none of it had been bureaucratic inevitability, that money had existed, had been designated, been sitting there, that a man with an expensive suit and a practiced expression had been standing between that money and the families it was to reach. Marcus sat very still. "Zoe's inhaler," he said, "is covered, retroactively. I've already spoken to St. Michael's and to the pharmacy. The prescription is approved as of this morning and the cost is covered." He was quiet for a moment. "The other families," he said, 41 families. "All of them are being contacted today. The fund is being audited and restored. Every pending application is being reviewed by my direct report. Not Roland's department, not a committee, mine personally." He looked at the fire. "He knew," Marcus said. "Not accusatory, just working through it. He set up the wallet thing because you had inadvertently handled the evidence. He didn't know what you knew or didn't know. He only knew you'd touched the wallet, and the wallet contained something that could ruin him. I didn't know any of it was there. I know you didn't. I didn't even look at the drive." "I know that too." He turned to look at her. "Did you know when I came in last night?" "No." She held his gaze. "No, I didn't. When you came in last night, I had doubts, not certainties. Doubts." She said it plainly, without the protective cushioning of euphemism. "I listened to someone who was very good at making suspicion sound like wisdom. I didn't push back the way I should have." He thought about that. "Then you followed me." "Yes. To find proof, too." She paused. "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. I told myself it was to understand. I think it was partly because something didn't add up, and I needed to see for myself." She looked at her hands. "I watched you at the clinic. I watched you at your apartment." She looked up. "I'm not asking you to be comfortable with that." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "My daughter asked if Santa knew our new address," he said, to change the subject, as a way of saying what he needed to say without saying it directly. "In case we had to move." Serena waited. "Told her he did," Marcus said. "She went to sleep satisfied, and I sat at the table with 4 envelopes and did math that didn't add up." He looked at the fire. "What I want you to understand is that I'm not telling you that so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because whatever you're about to offer me, I need to know it's not coming from that image." "What would you accept it coming from?" He thought about it seriously. "From the same place you'd offer anything to anyone else, because the work is worth doing and the person doing it is worth trusting." Serena had been in business for 18 years. She had made offers across many tables to many people, and she had learned to read the moment when a negotiation became something else. This was something else, she said. I'm going to rebuild the fund's administration from scratch. I need someone who understands what the families on that roster are actually going through, someone who reads case files, someone who has lived adjacent to it, someone with a structural background who can also evaluate community needs and hold institutions accountable when they don't deliver. She paused. I'm offering you a job, Director of Community Impact for the Voss Aldrich Children's Health Initiative. Full salary, full benefits, Zoe fully covered. Marcus looked at her. That's not charity, she said. That's not me trying to fix something or pay a debt or relieve my guilt. I need someone in that role who cannot be bought and cannot be intimidated. In the last 48 hours, you have demonstrated both of those things more clearly than anyone I have ever interviewed. He was quiet for a long time. The fire settled and shifted. Outside the lobby windows, Pittsburgh went on. Buses, pigeons, a woman arguing cheerfully with someone on her phone. A delivery truck double-parked on the corner. All the ordinary machinery of a city that didn't know what was happening in this particular lobby on this particular morning. I want to earn it, Marcus said. You'll have to. The work is hard and the people it serves deserve someone who takes it seriously. I'd need to understand exactly what the job is before I say yes. That's fair. I'll have the full scope written up today. He nodded slowly. He said, the other families, the ones who've been waiting, before anything about me is settled, I want to know they're being taken care of. First, Serena looked at him. They already are, she said. That was the first call I made. He looked at her for a moment longer. Then he extended his hand. She shook it. 3 days passed before things began to settle into their new shape. The morning after the boardroom, after Roland's termination, after the police visit, after Marcus's statement was cleared and the complaint formally withdrawn. Roland Hale hired a lawyer and issued a statement through him calling the accusations politically motivated and a breach of the confidentiality I maintained faithfully for 6 years. The statement lasted approximately 36 hours before the Federal Financial Crimes Division confirmed it had opened a preliminary investigation, which point the lawyer issued a shorter, quieter follow-up statement saying his client was cooperating fully. Serena's board met on a Thursday. She told them everything, the full contents of the drive, the shell accounts, the fund diversion, the years of it. She did not minimize or contextualize. She gave them the facts and let the facts be what they were. 3 board members had been in the room when Roland made the original pitch for the fund's structure, the structure that had made the diversion possible. And 2 of them sat through the presentation in a very particular silence that suggested they were running their own private calculations about culpability. Serena told them those calculations were their business and not hers, but that the fund was going to be restructured and externally audited before another dollar moved through it. Anyone who wanted to object to that could see themselves out. No one objected. The call to the 41 families was handled by Serena's personal assistant, a woman named Delphine who had been with her for 7 years and had the kind of organized compassion that made her very good at delivering news that was simultaneously good and a reminder of how long it had been bad. Most of the calls were answered by mothers. Most of the mothers went quiet when Delphine told them that their application had been approved, that coverage was being arranged. Someone would follow up within 24 hours to confirm specifics. The quiet was not disbelief exactly, more like the sound of a person recalibrating, adjusting to a piece of news that required the rewriting of the last several months. A few of them cried. Delphine noted it all in her records without comment, because it was her job to be thorough, and it was also her job to let people have their moment without narrating it. Marcus went back to work. Not the overnight maintenance shift. That contract had been quietly rerouted back to the crew chief, pending the new arrangement, but work nonetheless. The day after the boardroom, he was back at Miller and Rosa's by 7, fixing the seal on the refrigeration unit in the back, because Rosa had mentioned it was losing temperature, and he had time. Rosa made him sit down for breakfast first. He sat. Zoe came in at 8:30, brought by Mrs. Caldwell, because Zoe had heard about the diner from her father and had been lobbying for pancakes with what Mrs. Caldwell described as diplomatic determination. She sat across from her father at the counter stool and ate her pancakes with the focused energy of a child who had spent several days resting and was done with it. She was breathing better. Noticeably, measurably better. The new medication had been picked up the afternoon of the first day, and Dr. Peterson had called that evening to confirm the dosage and ask how Zoe was responding, and Marcus had said she was doing well. His voice had done something when he said it that he hadn't entirely controlled. Rosa watched the two of them at the counter and didn't say anything because she didn't need to. Serena came to the diner on the fourth day. She came in the morning in jeans and a sweater again, the cap gone this time. She walked in like someone who was testing whether a place would accept them differently now that they'd been there before. Rosa looked up from behind the counter and said, "Corner booth's open," without making a thing of it. Serena took the corner booth. Marcus was there, not at the counter this time, at a table near the window with Zoe, who had a book open and was reading it with the slightly performative concentration of a child who wanted credit for doing so. When he saw Serena come in, he gave a small nod. She nodded back. She had the job offer with her, fully written, salary and scope and benefits laid out in the clean language of something meant to be read and understood. She'd had legal draft it, but she'd revised it herself 3 times, making sure nothing in it implied obligation or debt. It was an offer of work. That was all it was, and all it was meant to be. After a while, Marcus came over. He sat across from her and read the document. He read it carefully. Not performing carefulness, but actually reading, the way someone reads something they intended to hold to. Pen in his jacket pocket, and he used it, not to sign, but to make small marks, notes to himself, questions. After 10 minutes, he looked up. "Community liaison component," he said. "I want to be in the field, not sitting in an office reviewing files. That's the expectation. I want that written explicitly." "Tell me the language you want," he told her. She wrote it in the margin. "The approval process for applications," he said. "I want final review authority on denials. Nobody gets denied without my sign-off. That's a significant responsibility." "I know." She wrote it in the margin. "Benefits effective immediately," he said. "Not after a 90-day probationary period." "Agreed." She wrote it. He looked at the document for another moment. Then he looked up at her. "You revised this yourself," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "Legal drafted it, but you changed it." "Yes." "Why?" She thought about how to answer that honestly. "Because I wanted to make sure it said what I meant. Not what was protective. What I meant." He held her gaze for a moment. Then he took the pen from the margin of the document and signed it. Serena left the diner 20 minutes later with a signed copy of the offer letter. Paper bag Rosa had pressed into her hands containing 2 slices of pie she hadn't asked for and wouldn't pretend to resist. She stood on the sidewalk outside for a moment in the cold Pittsburgh morning. The street was ordinary. The auto parts store still closed. The chain-link fence still surrounding the mud where a playground used to be. The apartment building still there, with its dented mailboxes and its buzzing porch light. But there was a small Christmas tree visible in one second-floor window, decorated with paper stars, and the curtains on either side of it were open. She looked at it for a while. Then she got in the Lincoln, and Victor pulled away from the curb, and she opened the pie bag and didn't say anything. Because some mornings you sit with what you've done, and let it be what it is without explaining it to anyone. Snow came to Pittsburgh on December 24th, the way it sometimes did, suddenly generously, covering the cracked pavement and the mud lot, and the rusted swing, and the rooftop of the auto parts store in white that made everything look temporary and clean. The apartment on the second floor of the Haverford Street building was warmer than usual, because the building's heat had been fixed, though it had, through a tenant services program that Serena had expanded city-wide after realizing the Haverford building, was representative of a dozen others in her portfolio where deferred maintenance had been eating into residents' utility costs for years. The warmth came partly from the small space heater Marcus had finally replaced with a working unit, partly from the soup on the stove, and partly from Zoe, who had decided that Christmas Eve required activity and had been in motion for approximately 4 hours. The paper stars on the tree had been joined by a few new ones, rounder this time, more confident. Zoe had found better scissors. The 4 envelopes on the counter were gone. In their place was one envelope, not labeled Christmas or rent or medicine, just sitting there open, emptied of its old arithmetic. Marcus had taken everything out of it the previous week, sat at the table with a cup of coffee and the new employment contract, done different math. The math had added up. It was a strange feeling, not joy exactly. Not in the first moment, more like the way your eyes adjusted to a room after being in the dark a long time, slightly disorienting before it was good. Zoe appeared in the kitchen doorway in her pajamas, the purple ones with the white stars, freshly washed, with a rabbit under one arm and a folded piece of paper in the other hand. "I made something," she said. She handed Marcus the paper. He unfolded it. It was a drawing in purple crayon. 2 figures in front of a small tree, which she had colored green and hung with small yellow circles meant to be stars. The taller figure had a cap and a toolbox. The smaller one was carrying a rabbit. Below them, in careful block letters, U.S. Marcus looked at the drawing for a moment. Then he looked at his daughter. "Where are we going to put this?" he said. "On the tree. It's a big piece of paper. It's a small tree. Fair point." He carried it to the tree and considered the logistics. "We're going to need a lot of tape." "I have a lot of tape," Zoe said seriously. She went for the tape. He stood in front of the little tree and looked at it, 3 feet tall in its coffee can, paper stars, single strand of tinsel, and now one large purple crayon drawing taking up approximately 1/3 of its total surface area, and something in his face went very quiet and very settled at the same time. The knock at the door was light, hesitant in the way of someone who wasn't sure of their welcome. Marcus opened it. Serena was on the landing with a paper bag in one hand and her other hand in her coat pocket. She was not wearing the cap. She had come, apparently, as herself. "I brought things," she said. "I wasn't sure what to bring, so I brought." She looked in the bag. A pie, which seemed appropriate. New set of coloring pencils. Because Mrs. Caldwell mentioned Zoe had been going through them quickly, and she paused, not sure about the rest. "I may have overcorrected." Marcus looked at her for a moment. "Come in," he said. She came in. The warmth of the apartment met her at the door. The soup smell, the heater, the small lit tree. She looked around the kitchen with the expression of someone seeing something clearly for the first time. Even though she'd seen pieces of it before, through glass at a distance in the middle of the night. Zoe appeared from the bedroom with the tape. She looked at Serena with the direct appraisal of a child deciding something important. "You're the lady with the wallet," Zoe said. "That's me." Serena said, "Daddy says you're okay." "I'm trying to be." Zoe considered this. "Are you staying for soup?" Serena looked at Marcus. "She makes the final call on guests," he said. "Then yes," Serena said. "If that's okay." Zoe shrugged in the way of a child granting permission that was never really in question. "You can help with the drawing first." She held up the tape. Serena took off her coat and hung it over a chair. The 3 of them stood in front of the small tree and debated the structural merits of affixing a large piece of paper to it, eventually arrived at a solution involving the tape and a bent paper clip and 2 of the sturdier stars, and it held. They ate soup at the small table, Zoe talking steadily about her book and a classmate named Priya, who had given her a birthday card in October, and theory that the rabbit's ear was growing back in a funny direction. Marcus and Serena let her talk. They said little to each other directly. The things that needed saying had mostly been said in offices and diners and police waiting rooms and signed margins of documents. What was left didn't need words exactly. After dinner, Zoe fell asleep on the couch between them with the rabbit on her stomach, going quickly and completely the way children did, tipping over into sleep like a small boat in calm water. Marcus covered her with the blanket. Serena sat in the other chair with her pie plate balanced on her knee. Outside, the snow came down past the window, covering Haverford Street in quiet white. The porch light buzzed. The paper stars in the little tree caught the light and held it. "She's going to be okay," Serena said. Not asking. Saying yeah, Marcus said. He was looking at Zoe, the small, slow rise and fall of her breathing. Easy now, the clear, easy breathing of a child who had medication that worked, and a warm room, and a father in the next chair. He had the expression of a man who was not bracing for anything. Just present. Just there. Serena looked at him, and then at the little tree, the purple crayon drawing that said U.S. in block letters and took up too much space and held everything in place anyway. She reached into the pocket of her coat, hanging on the chair the black leather wallet in its inner pocket, and took out the wallet. Inside, past the cards and the empty space where the cash had been, was a folded piece of paper. A paper star, small and slightly lopsided, that Zoe had handed her 2 days ago at St. Michael's, pressing it seriously into Serena's hand and saying, "For your wallet, so you don't lose it again." Serena had kept it there. She took it out and looked at it. A child star, cut with children's scissors, a little uneven on one side. She set it on the arm of the chair. Then she picked up her pie, sat in the warm kitchen of a small apartment on Haverford Street, and let the snow fall outside and the quiet fall inside. Didn't ask for anything more than exactly what this was. 3 months later, Marcus Dean drove to St. Michael's Children's Clinic on a Tuesday morning with a list of 11 families on the fund's active roster and a backpack full of files he needed to review in person with Dr. Peterson. He was in a better car, not new but newer, reliable, used Accord with heat on both sides. And he had Zoe's current inhaler in the glove compartment because he carried it everywhere. Habit by now. The kind of habit you didn't try to break, because it was the kind that kept people safe. The clinic's waiting room looked the same. The television in the corner played the same Silent Nature documentary. The plastic chairs, the vending machine, the fluorescent warmth of a place that was doing its best. But the woman at the admissions desk had a new expression when he came in, the expression of tired apology. The expression of someone who had been told that the pending review queue was down to 0, and the processing time on new applications was now measured in days, not months. The expression of someone who believed contingently, carefully, the system they were part of was not entirely broken. "Mr. Dean," she said. "Morning, Renee." He set the backpack down. "Dr. Peterson in yet?" 10 minutes. Coffee's fresh. He poured a cup and sat in one of the plastic chairs, not in the back, not near the door, just a chair, the middle of the room, and opened the first file. He had a lot of work to do. He started. The end. If this story stayed with you, if it was the moment Marcus returned the wallet, or the pharmacy desk scene, or something else entirely, drop it in the comments. And if you know someone who needs to hear a story about quiet dignity tonight, share this one with them. Thank you for being here until the end.